What is going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Back at it again. Fourth and final day here on the live stream this week. This is the Trade to Black podcast presented by Flowhub. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Adam Stettner going to come on again, CEO of FundCanna. We'll talk about some of the struggles the cannabis industry faces and how a lot of people think it's due to regulation, it's due to oversupply, due to a lot of things, including price compression. But also, another thing is the timing of cash. So we'll dive into that and explain further as to what we mean by that. And as well, Kevin McKernan will join us. He's got some interesting takes on X this week about that op-ed on the New York Times about why there's a marijuana problem in America. And he'll give his reasons as to why that's probably far-fetched, clearly, as we discussed that the other day. So he'll give his take, and I'll bring up a few tweets that he's brought on. But very, very pinpointed person that really talks about the space itself and has some very, very good views and opinionated views on why cannabis right now should be viewed a lot differently in America. And when we see this noise, it's just noise. So with that, let's welcome in AV. Thursday time, last live stream of the week, just to give people a heads up before we go any further. Holiday on Canada and the US on Monday. So we'll be off on Monday, but we'll have content ready to roll on Monday regardless. But good to see you. How's the week been? And I know the tape is just really quiet right now.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually, we just got a pretty good headline out of Marijuana Moment. The Governor Kathy Hochul signed I don't know if it was an executive order, but she just signed legislation into law that actually revises the zoning issues that were going on in New York, retroactively opening 150 dispensaries that were going to have to close due to the wonky zoning laws. So that's great. That's a big boost for New York because it was a potential big mess that they were going to have to do to rezone and bring those and close down those dispensaries. I'm sure it was a bunch of social equity applicants and ROs that would have been not very good for the market. And it's good that she was acting with haste to get that done and make sure that those 150 businesses can stay open.
You think New York, you can finally get rid of that label of the turnaround story, like this is New York now, because everything you hear, it seems like it's turning into one of the better markets in America. Of course it is, right?
It's the best market right now in terms of growth. It's cultivating brands. It's functioning at a high level. It's, I think, on pace to do like 1.6 to 1.8 billion.
Yeah.
This year, it closed the year last year over $1 billion in revenue. I mean, New York has the opportunity to be the largest market in the country if they get it right. Like I said, I don't bank on Florida going adult use in 2026.
Yeah,
it's probably going to be a 2028 issue at best. That gives New York a leg up, and that gives New York the ability to take pole position and grow and aggressively grow in the next 2 and 3 years. Being in 2026, 27, and then all of 28, as the elections won't happen until November in 2028. I would be betting on New York big right now from an investment standpoint. If I was deploying capital into private businesses, I would be deploying capital into New York. I would be looking at brands in New York. I mean, New York is doing a lot of good things right now, and it's actually growing, which is what we need.
Big Apple, big opportunity in New York. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it's got an insane population.
Well, this is what a lot of people thought from the get-go in this, when it came to this market. I'm trying to think of how many years ago was when adult use went live in New York. Has it been 5?
No.
Not that long?
I would say 3 at least.
Either way, I guess it's trial and error, and that is a great trial and error market. They learned a lot of valuable lessons, but clearly, as I don't like to say, it's the turnaround story. New York is New York now, and the days of saying they keep screwing this up are long gone. And it's to your point, Anthony, it is turning into the best market in the U.S. right now.
You're right, actually.
Has it been 5?
Right. It's March 31st, 2021.
I thought it was.
I thought it was way. I think it was less because I guess it's been 3 years since the market actually got its shit together. But yeah, March 31st, 2021 was the official legalization date in New York. However, the first licensed retail dispensary opened in December 29th, 2022. So technically 2023. It's been operating for 3 years.
Rich folks moving out of New York City. Ma'am, damn it. Yeah. That has been nothing but
I don't buy that narrative. I mean, New York is New York. New York is never going to lose its appeal to people of means and the financial sector and commerce. New York
City has gone through a little bit of an identity issue, I think, since, COVID. A lot of people have moved out of the city and moved down south, but yeah, you're right. There's still a lot. It's New York City. This is like perhaps one of the most, if not the most influential city in the world. But I don't want to sound very biased to North America. There's some great cities in the world, but New York City is an unbelievable city.
Correct.
All right. Before we get into our first segment, a quick reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Flowhub. If you're a dispensary operator looking to scale your tech stack matters. Flowhub powers some of the most recognized brands in cannabis, including yesterday's podcast, Cheech and Chong's dispensaries. That trust earned at the highest level of the industry, from compliance to inventory to seamless retail execution. Flowhub is built to help you grow without the chaos. So if you're serious about scaling, go online, book a demo right now at flowhub.com. All right, let's jump in to our first segment. As I said off the top, there's a lot of people in this space that like to look at regulation, oversupply, or price compression as the struggles with the cannabis industry. But the real issue, which often goes unnoticed, is about the timing of cash. So with that, let's talk more about it and bring in the CEO of FundCanna, Adam Stettner, back to the podcast. Good to see you. How are things?
Things are great. And thank you for having me again. I just can I jump in a little to the New York talk?
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm backstage listening to you guys. I was shouting out dates out loud, scaring people in the office here. So it's an emotional thing for me for two reasons. First, I'm from New York, born and raised, 32 years in and around New York City. And what the rollout, and again, I mean no offense, but I can't help myself. The rollout in New York was a mess. So you had Cuomo sign it into law, as you guys said, in Q1 of 21. Then it took almost 2 years to get the thing stood up. But if you remember, they had a bottleneck of almost 5,000 licenses that they just didn't get through. And while they were going through that, they were not enforcing any kind of enforcement against illicit storefronts that were opening up. So you had all these New York shops, which is why, Anthony, you said no, it can't be that long, because it wasn't until Hochul grabbed the OCM and shook it and got rid of the director and brought in a new one that they started to actually unclog the pipe there, because there was that explosion. There were literally thousands of shops around New York.
Was it Operation Padlock? I think it was called, or Operation Choke Point or something. Yeah. Or they went at the landlord level and started saying, hey, if you're going to facilitate this and house these tenants, we are coming after you. Yep. And then it started to really close up those shops very, very quickly.
Well, wasn't there also recent issues about some of the, licenses around school districts, if I remember correct? Yeah.
That was what Kathy Hochul just rectified, putting that legislation through that's going to actually allow 150 of those businesses to stay in operations without having to rezone.
Okay. Interesting. What do you think what it was? There's a lot of moving parts that you think about New York, but this clearly was not thought through when it was first launched. But clearly now, as I said to Anthony, I don't want to make this sound like a turnaround story, because it continued to perform and could be the best market in the U.S., is what Anthony just said as well.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, you think the size of New York, forget New York City. I mean, I can't forget New York City, but just think about the sheer size of New York State. And the industry and innovation and the ability to consume. And I think it's a monster. And you think if we just use the expansion over the last few years, we're still just talking hundreds, right? Where other states are thousands and they're smaller. The rollout was such a mess early that the runway still has miles ahead of it for scale and expansion. And there's no doubt that demand is huge. And I think the legal demand will begin to erode. The illicit will erode while legal continues to scale.
We got Operation Shadlock there, Adam, because everybody's saying, what's my prediction as to when we get Attorney General Pam Bondi to sign off on that? So that is why that comment is popping up from a good friend.
I got it. It was, by the way, El Guapotron is spot on. It was it was like Padlock to Protect, I think was the name of the program.
Correct.
So, and El Guapo just said it was Padlock, so Shadlock. And I agree. And then we can jump into the Bondi talk if that gets everybody fired up as well.
You know what? I'm going to do a video on this tomorrow, but this isn't a one-person thing. This is more or less an agency thing. And I'm not going to lie, like that performance, whatever you want to call it yesterday, I have no words. But clearly, there's a lot of people, the sentiment on Twitter right now is that we are a long ways away from anything being signed off. And I get why the sentiment's low. I don't want to go down that road and talk all negative because, you know, this is cannabis. It's a roller coaster ride. And when things are down, people get real down. And when things are up, people are really up as well. But interesting day. I don't know how you view that or process all that, but do you think it has any impact on what's going on in cannabis outside of all these major topics and conversations and things that the administration's got to handle? But do you think this delays in any way the rescheduling process of cannabis?
Well, I think forgetting Bondi just for a moment, and we can come back to that. I think in general, the administration has a lot of priorities right now. Between what was going on in Minneapolis and ICE, and I'm not politicizing anything, so please, no one jump on me. But it's just the reality of an administration that has their hands full.
Yeah.
Aside from the wars that are going on overseas, what's going on in South America with Venezuela, and then what we've got going on domestically. We could keep going. We could talk about Greenland and the Arctic Circle, and there are a lot of things. And those things, I'm not speaking for myself, but there are a lot of those things that this administration will view as higher priority or more urgent, especially when it comes to midterm elections and making sure voters feel satisfied. The economy, rates, we've got a new Fed chair nomination. Yeah. All of those things are distracting for this administration. And if Trump said when this came out December 18th, I want this to be looked at in the next few weeks, right? He stated it was urgent for him. He doesn't do that lightly, and I appreciate that he did that. Again, please, I'm not politicizing.
Yeah, I agree.
But then you look what's happened since, and it's understandable. I don't like it, but it's understandable that there's a distraction. And then add all the BS around Epstein and the other things that Bondi is deflecting on or picking fights on. And it doesn't bode well for like days or weeks, but I don't think it means it's not happening ever.
Correct.
I still think it's happening.
And there was actually a very important data point yesterday that I talked about with Shad this morning, where Pablo Zuanich had the CEO of Charlotte's Web on yesterday for a roundtable discussion, where he said point blank, and he's part of these conversations, that the CBD pilot for Medicare the regulations were signed and finished 2 weeks ago. So that, and I agree with you, in terms of order of operations, we still don't know whether Pam signing the final rule has to be done before that, or if that is going to potentially go live and then the signing of the final rule might follow that. So it's a good data point with what he said. However, I agree with you. There's a laundry list of things right now, both at the administrative level and at the executive branch, plus the shit show that happened yesterday, which doesn't really waver my confidence in it getting done, but it kind of wavers my confidence. Is she even doing anything at the DOJ, and can she do her job?
No, look, it's incredibly frustrating, Anthony. I'll say to you, like, this should be a priority. This has gone on too long. It's ridiculous what this industry deals with. I speak about my frustrations all the time, but I wrap it in logic regarding why things should evolve and change. And a lot of the things that the government, whether local, state, or Fed, a lot of the things that they're complaining about gets rectified only if they move. Yeah. It's like people that complain about things they don't like, and then they don't do anything to fix it. And so if we want to fix it, the first step is rescheduling. It's not the last step, but it gives us the momentum to begin fixing a lot of the things that are just busted. So it, in my mind, should be a priority. We're always going to have international relations issues. We're always going to have local enforcement issues. And and I don't want it to be traded on as an excuse. I'm just realistic here. Don't shoot the messenger. That there are a lot of things to point to as distractions. But I say it's BS if we don't get some movement soon.
Yeah. I think of this, like, I think it happens sooner rather than later. And the reason I say that is because every single time they're asking about Epstein questions, she was talking about the Dow and the economy and the jobs creation. And I think they have to get into order as to deflect this attention. I know Anthony's sitting there laughing. Here comes the Shadlock guarantee. But when you look at this, after what happened yesterday, I think a lot of people were asking me, does she lose her job? Or I don't know if the proper term is firing, but does she resign from her position? I think that would be crazy at this stage for the administration to have the attorney general resign, would it not?
She's not,
Adam, and I don't see her going anywhere. Do you guys?
No, I don't. But you know what's interesting is there've been a couple times where it feels like Trump is sending that message. You know, he has his way of making sure that people realize when they're not in great favor, and he doesn't do it behind a closed door. And I respect it, but I think she's been on her back foot a couple of times. I don't know that she gets fired or resigns, but I think there are moments where he's displeased and makes it known.
Yes.
And I think yesterday is an example of a time where he should make it known that that didn't go great.
No.
I would not want to be her child showing up late for curfew. That's for sure. She's a real deal. That's for sure. Listen, we had you on last couple of weeks. We talked about the amount of unpaid invoices in this space and how it's all about structure. And let's fast forward into this week, look more into the industry. And we look at things from a macro level. It looks like companies that are doing, whether it's small, medium, or large, even large companies into the millions, a lot of them feel like they're cash strapped right now. And on paper, they look healthy, but operationally, you know, the money isn't lining up necessarily with the bills. So when it comes to timing of cash, such as a critical problem for cannabis operators, is there some truth to that? Are you seeing that? And if so, like what exactly, if you look under the hood, is happening when it comes to a lot of those concerns that companies have when it comes to the structure of cash right now?
Well, I think it's a complicated question and answer, but I'm not afraid to put my neck on the table here. There are some large companies, and I'm not talking about the big MSOs that we all know and that I'm sure a lot of your listeners are invested in. But there's some that candidly, they're just way over levered. And when we see those balance sheets, we looked at one yesterday. They're a multi-state operator. They're vertically integrated. And their financials don't look good. At their core. But what I would say is the vast majority of this industry, it's not an insolvency issue. It's a timing issue. It's a capital constraint issue. And that is the vast majority of the space. The vast majority of this space does not have an insolvency issue. They have a timing issue. And it's important because it's a big distinction.
Well, we said off the top, it's the timing of cash. It's one thing to sell something. It's another thing when the actual cash happens. There's a gap. What do you look at as far as a gap as to what's going on right now, as far as timelines, as to what you see that has that stress on the industry?
Well, I think we talked last time about the three kind of legs of the stool that everything needs, which is supply, demand, and capital infrastructure. And so we're dealing with all three legs of that stool are different lengths. So the stool's wobbling. We have oversupply in a lot of places and the demand is there, but the outlets to move the supply are broken. And then as part of the capital piece, it's the economics. We have overtaxation and a break there, but we also don't have financial tools other than a lot of what we do to smooth that cash flow out. And so we see it though across the whole supply chain. So the mismatch, put simply, is even among the big MSOs, many of whom we work with and we talk to about both their own enterprise and then the wholesale side of their business, is just the cash outlay relative to the timing of their revenue. And this industry is very unique in that there aren't many financial tools. There isn't a uniform infrastructure that smooths out cash outlay to revenue. And so there's this period of what I would call dead money.
Right.
The money is not dead forever, but it's dead long enough that it creates a gap in financials. And so you have this like sine wave, right? These oscillations, kind of like when we look at stock charts and you see nothing goes up in a straight line, rarely down in a straight line, although we may have big down moves. There's always this like up and down. Well, in business, the more and the wider, the more waves you have and the wider those waves are, the harder it is to grow and the harder it is to predict both spend and revenue. And so this industry lacks a uniform way to smooth that out. Other industries don't. So like there was just big headline news about Google borrowing.
Yes.
Google's borrowing to fuel their growth, but they're sitting on billions of cash. This industry isn't sitting on billions of cash, and they have very few outlets to borrow to fuel growth, to smooth this disconnect we just talked about. And then you add all of this broken supply and demand infrastructure, and that's why everything wobbles. The good news is there's a way to fix all three legs of the stool.
I was going to say, what is that? Is that reform?
It is. I mean, it's some of what we're already talking about. That's like, look, I really believe in the industry. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think that we were in the right place at the right time. Most of us are probably a little early, but better to be early than late. And so I would say you bring in reform, which will start to balance. And a lot of the states are now listening. So we just talked about New York. Instead of doubling down on the OCM they had, they revamped the OCM and mandated that it get fixed. And under the threat of being fired, it got, I won't say it's fixed yet, but it's on the path. And I agree with Anthony. It's the trajectory looks good. You've been talking a lot about Virginia, Pennsylvania, some of these states. As they talk about it, even Shapiro in Pennsylvania, the narrative is starting to shift toward a demand for an efficient market. That will help. And other states are going to follow. I'm meeting, I can't name who, but I'm meeting on the East Coast with a couple of regulators that are asking, based on the data we have and what we're seeing, what do they think, where do they think their biggest break is in their state? And what can they do to...
That was actually my next question was, are you talking to regulators about market structure to create more efficient markets? Because we've talked about broken market structures. We laughed when we were like, well, show me an efficient market structure, a market that's truly working. And it's like, well, that's completely subjective. And you could argue from probably different people's point of view that it is and that it isn't, depending where you are in the supply chain. So you are actively talking with regulators about, let's say, market construction to make sure, I'm assuming, they get things right on inception versus like what we saw within New York or like what we're seeing within Ohio right now.
Yes, but the only thing I'll add is I'm trying to talk to as many people that I can, in part because I want to learn and understand why. I'm a big why guy. I want to understand why. Why is it done this way? And it's okay if the answer is we didn't know what to do. We had to start somewhere. Now, I don't think it's unacceptable. How
often does that happen?
Not as often as any of us would like. But it's happening more now than. So for the first 2.5 years, nobody would talk to me at all, and for the last, I would say, year, dialogue is occurring, but I have now meetings on my calendar with like decision makers. And I only have two states, but that's two more than I had before. And I think getting those two, once those occur, I can go to other states and say, I've spoken to X and Y. I would love to fill you in on what we discussed and where. Now, again, I'm not implying for a minute that I have all the answers. But I do think that when we work together, we can arrive at a better place than where we are today. But what I'm trying to explain to them is supply and demand, like basic economics. But also there's a lot of limitation that they put on investment and factoring and bridge financing or gap financing, where it's prohibitive. It's prohibitive to the operator. It's prohibitive to the state and their tax collection. But most importantly, it crushes the operator and it crushes the consumer. They end up paying 40% more to buy through legal outlets because of a prohibitive structure that you, again, there's a nice way to do this, but that you installed. So that's okay. Let's fix it together.
Yeah, that's great.
But I have to. It's BS. It really is.
It is BS, and I'm not going to name markets, but you can draw parallels to, let's say, the companies that are in the cohort that rolls out a market, which also have influence in how the markets are constructed, which do put up these anti-competitive structures to insulate their businesses and keep prices high for a foreseeable future, and or give themselves runway to really just take advantage of that curve. Me personally, I've been on here several times saying I'm for free and fair markets. Open it up, give people licenses, let the free market decide who's going to put a product on the shelf that's going to command consumer interest, clip a margin for the producer, and let the market go. But we haven't really seen that in cannabis.
We haven't. And the only piece that I want to add is we don't really have free and fair market anywhere, because even when free market rules, let's say, so for example, I'm going to use California again as an example. California regulates how many licenses go out to cultivators.
Yep.
But they don't, as a state, they don't control how many licenses go to dispensaries, nor where they're allowed to be. That's controlled by municipalities. So even if we had a free market at the state level, you don't have a free market at the municipal or county level. And therefore you have cannabis deserts for outlet to consumer, but it may not be a desert in terms of cultivation. And so you end up with oversupply, which leads to price compression. So it's not about protecting margins. It's about destroying them because you're create. And then what ends up happening, you flood the market, price per gram goes way down. Look what happens, California and Michigan. Michigan's an even bigger offender. So like, if we're going to do free and fair markets, you still need to adhere to supply and demand. It's like, it's like, fourth grade level stuff. We can't just have free market for cultivation or manufacturing and not have free market elsewhere. So we just need balance. And that's like everything else in life. Without balance, it's broken.
Yeah.
Speaking of, you were talking about with a lot with what goes on with FundCanna, you're talking to, I'm assuming, CFOs and controllers when the businesses warrant that position due to the organization size, about creating balance within the cash flow operations of the business. Cannabis has seen peaks and troughs of human capital coming into the space. I mean, how many operators are you talking to that fundamentally understand, can comprehend, and see the levers that you're allowing them to put into their business as advantageous versus ones that are apprehensive?
So it's a great question. The issue is getting to the point where we can really have conversation. Most operators, if we just stop for a minute and just be human, most people don't want to appear to be vulnerable. Again, I don't want to be too real here, but nobody wants to be vulnerable. And as a business operator, regardless of your role, if you're in finance or operating, you might have 5 dispensaries, you might be vertically integrated. Nobody wants to say, I need something. Correct. And when you're operating a business, even more so, you want your team, you want others to view you as a leader. But the reality is we're all vulnerable. And this industry, as I said, if we have got 3 legs of the stool and they're all uneven, we should be propping each other up and having real conversation. When we have the conversation, most people, the conversation doesn't happen at the beginning because of what I just stated. But when you have the conversation, it's a surprising amount of people that get it. I would say 70% of people understand the value of having access to revolving capital. And they understand it pretty early.
What do you think's going through their head, right before they finally make that call and book that meeting with you? Like, what is that last, I guess, 9th yard before it becomes 10, where they're like dealing with everything that becomes, a little overwhelming, if that's the correct term?
I think there's usually a catalyst of some kind. It's not I would tell you, this is the surprising thing. It's usually not desperation.
No,
it's usually no. And I'll tell you, I was originally surprised by that. And this is the crazy part. Our capital is not most often used because of desperation. It's used for a purpose, and that can be an opportunity or desire to do something. And that's the catalyst to have dialogue with our team here, yep, or to go online and poke around and learn more, is usually, I want to do X, whatever X is. And can this help me do that? And the nice thing about that is that also demonstrates a little bit less vulnerability, even though I don't know how to do this without your capital. That's more like, hey, I don't need to do this. Is there safety net? I want to do it. And then I would say the other 30% is like, I don't know what to do. And then the nice thing is we can speak depending on the vertical and the geography. We've talked with over 5,000 operators, and so we can speak to how others are doing things without giving trade secrets away, of course. But it's not like there isn't anything that we haven't seen. And I tell you, all of the operators in this space, it's different but the same, and they're going through a lot of the similar pain, and they don't have to go through it alone. I mean, that's the point of providing capital.
You bring up geography. Like, how much does that come into play? Is there certain I don't want to name any markets, but is there certain places that pop up with red flags?
There are. Sure. And what I'd say is it's not always what you'd expect. So like, we talked about California and Michigan. I'll say that as an example. Yeah. Those states perform quite well for us, but we're underwriting. And so what you find is some states are limited license and some aren't. And then it's a question of not only understanding geography and the structure of how they license, but also understanding the supply chain dynamic and where in the supply chain are we funding and what's the money being used for. Yeah. But it's usually a very good use of capital. People are using the money wisely. Look, the average client that uses our capital, I can't speak to other money, but the average client's growing by well in excess of 50%. 50% top line growth after they take on capital. Well, the reason for that is it unlocks. It gets them off that sine wave, smooths it out, and they're able to execute. You can't execute when you don't have access to liquidity.
Yeah. So that was one of the reasons I asked about the level of sophistication, because I'm assuming a lot of companies do come to you and start to engage in the conversation, like you said, not out of desperation, but when they're modeling growth. They're trying to figure out, how are we going to grow the enterprise? And I'm assuming they look at their cash flows, they look at just the way the company's operating, and they have that aha moment where it's like, yes, revolving capital will help me smooth out that balance sheet, improve operations, and we can invest CapEx somewhere in the business, whether it's or invest in inventory to grow the business on a percentage basis.
So, I mean, what you're saying is right. It's just, we go back to this piece about your money is locked up. Like, you're either not paying your bills and we have delinquent AR and you're sitting with AP, right? So the seller never gets paid. The buyer has AP owed, accounts payable, on their balance sheet because they need to do something. But they can't do it because they don't have, the money is due now, but it's going to take me 4 months. Now this happens, even businesses that are doing 60 to 80 million a year. This is still happening. It's just, it's a question of scale. It's not a question, once you're big, you're not dealing with this. Yeah. But if you can smooth that out, it resolves a lot of the issue. Then when you have the idea to grow, it's not like you're robbing from one to pay the other. You're able to pay over time and then take on new opportunity. And what you're really doing is smoothing out and stacking opportunities on each other. The revenue builds up, and now you've got predictability. That is what's lacking right now. And then when you add in these geographies, like take New York 2 years ago, it doesn't matter. You could throw money at an issue, but if they're surrounded by 18 illicit stores and their tax rate is crazy and their rent is crazy, and you can't compete, right? So we need regulation, and that's why I also, like, I won't go into it. I won't steal thunder on the next interview you've got, but I read that op-ed piece, and they're wrong on so many different levels. It's crazy. Like, I respect opposing views, but we need forums where we can, if somebody says A, it's point and counterpoint. I'm not saying, I don't want to invalidate everything. I don't want to spend the time debating. I understand how you feel. Will you please just listen to the other side? How do we now meet in the middle and push forward together? Doesn't have to be my way, but we can't do it your way either. So let's just find the middle ground here. That's what compromise is about. So I think there's a fix here for all of the stuff we're discussing.
Agreed.
And I do think there's momentum building.
We have to get a good publicist, because Mr. Varrell's got to make some appearances on these networks. That's I think the solution, because we need some people to respond to some of these accusations about cannabis that are so far-fetched. I had somebody from New York call me last night, and he was watching this piece on Fox News, and how it was completely
insane.
I was like, what is that? And he's like, are you guys, please tell me you're working somehow, some way to get on these mainstream platforms to educate. And I told him, I said, look, even if we're given the opportunity, that's going to be in it. The challenge in it itself is these networks are not going to want people like us on to basically shed a little bit of light and look at things differently, because there's a narrative that they want to push. And
if you notice, the entire PSYOP coordinated campaign, whatever you want to call it, there has not been a single person that has said that cannabis it makes you a loser, it makes you whatever. The entire crusade against cannabis, there is not a single person that thought to go against the HHS and say that possibly one of the strongest health organizations on the planet basically said that cannabis has accepted medical value for X, Y, and Z. It does X, Y, and Z. No one has, doctors, sitting physicians, MDs, no one has said, well, the HHS, they're full of shit. Or we don't believe the HHS's study.
Yeah. No
one said that. That's how you know that it's a complete, just hollowed out argument that's completely subjective.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing. There is no strong evidence that that these things are backed up. The negative stuff is backed up by science. It just isn't. Right. And they you talk about all of these things. They don't mention that there's never been a death from THC consumption by itself. There have been accidents that occur, of course. Yeah, but there are hundreds of thousands of deaths from opioids, from alcohol, from tobacco, from prescription drugs, from you can't watch TV without seeing all the side effects associated with the drugs that we allow people to buy. Give me the side effects here. What? Lethargic? What are we talking about here? It's got nothing compared to rectal bleeding, right? So like which is not THC, but the prescription drugs. So it is just, it's crazy. So NIH and some of these other studies, they're now even saying that it expands brain health. So here we are dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's and all these other things, and we're not doing any studies. But the op-eds and these pieces and the, as you call, psyops, they drop the stuff, but they're not really backing it up with stats. Even traffic accidents aren't going up. They talk about the ad hoc story about like youth and ER visits. It's all BS. So we've got to stop on that and get to current science, current views. We've got to begin to normalize this and just evolve the position here. It's not going away. It's just not going away.
Conversation's getting louder. I remember getting into the psychedelic space. We were covering a lot of public companies there, but some of the research that was taking place. But yeah, anything when it came to Alzheimer's, like there's never been really any research pertaining to that whatsoever. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are changing and have changed the last 5 years. And to your point, Adam, the conversation is only going to get louder and louder. Before I let you go, And if there's companies out there that are watching this right now, what indicators do you look for to verify a company is capable of handling, I guess, external finances, and maybe want to highlight some of that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think like what we look at, and look, anyone that's interested in finance in general will find it interesting. I mean, we look at bank statements and we're really looking at inflow and outflow of capital and just figuring out what's a payment that someone can support.
Right.
And then we back into a max approval rate, right? So like, we're not looking to tell somebody this is what we'll give you based on what you asked for. It's analysis of financials. But with an understanding and an eye on how ridiculous taxation is and the fact that very few people, at least at the federal level, pay the tax bill on time in full. That's crazy. What's interesting, though, is in traditional lending, if you're not up to date on your taxes, you're SOL.
Yeah.
The way we look at this is just inflow and outflow of money, balance sheet, P&L, compliance, of course, right? Because that's very important so that we avoid all of the real issues. And then determining based on financial metrics, our approval rate's north of 70%. So it's not like we're saying no to 5 out of 100. We're saying yes 70% of the time.
Okay.
And then it's the question of how you size it so that it doesn't become a burden. But what you see is when you size it right and you approve it right, clients come back over and over again because you're infusing the business with liquidity, which smooths everything out and gives them breathing room to operate the business instead of being stuck and pinched. It's just, so it's pretty straightforward, but analysis, not financial analysis, like I'm just a nerd with it. I love this stuff. And when you look at that, you can evolve your product too. You start to see where the need is, and then you create product based on need instead of saying to somebody, here's a credit box, either you fit it or you don't fit it.
Right.
Instead, you analyze the industry, you analyze the verticals, you analyze the issues we're all dealing with. Then you look at financials, then you design a product. And then that product should work for your client base.
Okay. Do you approve Cannabis podcasts?
Sure, Shad. We approve them. We just need to underwrite it.
Exactly. Listen, we're going to keep these conversations going, have these every single Thursday, but we're getting a lot of good feedback here. And it's a different angle that we're focusing on. But this is about really diving in deep and really understanding the day-to-day operations and what these companies deal with. But more importantly, the solutions that are actually right there in front of them. So yes, opportunities for companies, but more importantly as well for our viewers and investors understanding the whole process of what they're getting themselves into when they invest in this space. So listen, again, great interview. And more importantly, how do people get a hold of you?
FundCanna.com, FundCanna.com, okay. Or 844-420-FUND,
nice.
FUND.
Okay, perfect. We'll see you next Thursday. How's that sound?
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate your time.
Take care, everybody.
You as well. Really, man, I'm liking these. I guess Anthony's gone, but really liking these conversations that we're having with Adam. But great feedback, great comments. We're going to have Kevin McKernan on just a moment. But first, a quick word before we lock into our locked in portion. Quick word from our friends over at Free Nicotine Pouch. Hey everyone, with so much going on in the world right now, it's tough to keep up to everything that is indeed going on. From what's the latest in news, or what should I be following in the markets, to what should I be consuming on social media. The amount of information that goes on and on and on, it's endless. And when that happens, stress can definitely start to build up. And for someone like me, especially at my age, heck, I start losing my hair. And when that happens, I start questioning myself. Do I still have it? And am I focusing on the task at hand? And that's why I lean to Free Nicotine Pouches. It keeps me focused. It makes me feel clear with clarity. I have all the confidence in the world like I'm 23 years old again, and I have a head full of hair. Oh yeah, baby. So if you want to own your own edge and stay sharp without lighting anything up, log on to freepouch.com right now and save 20% by using the promo code TDR20 and get 20% off your next purchase. freepouch.com. What do you guys think of that hair, huh? I hope you liked it.
Mitch nailed it. Mitch nailed it.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, let's now locked in, presented by freepouch.com. Let's bring in Kevin McKernan back to the podcast. I think it's the second time. Good to see you, sir. What's going on?
How are my schizophrenic losers doing?
We've all got psychosis, apparently.
Oh yeah, I brought my my little vomiting vessel, so if I break out into cyclic vomiting here, I'm prepared.
How many times have you been to the emergency room this week?
806 million times.
Yeah. So I like the tweet that came out earlier today from you. The real reason the cannabis Karens are out in large force lately, they need a scapegoat for the increased prevalence of psychiatric conditions since 2021, and they're going to blame it on weed, not SSRIs, Adderall, mRNAs, but more importantly, weed. And that's pretty much bang on. What I find, I just can't believe that we're in 2026 now, that a lot of lobbyists, lawmakers, mainstream media companies, like they actually think this stuff works. There is so much information for people to research, do their own due diligence, and people are doing exactly that because you see the amount of percentage of people in America that want cannabis reform in place. But how much do you think any of this stuff that they're doing actually works, or does it at all?
In referring to, I'm sorry, I missed the scope of the question there. I was getting set
just with regards to, like, you know, you see op-eds and you see mainstream media companies trying to cure this fear mongering towards weed.
Yeah. I mean, no one read that article. Everyone that was parroting it, they were given a script of like 4 points, right? It was not your dad's weed. It was causes psychosis, Alex Berenson, cyclic vomiting or cyclic, cannabinoid hyperemesis, which I don't think anyone out there actually knows the difference between the two. And then I think the final one was outside of those three, there seem to be THCs going up over time, and we have violence or something related to it. But I didn't. They parroted it and didn't actually dig into the article. You go into the article and it doesn't really have any data to support this, right? They have one mention in there about CHS, citing 2.7 million cases of this in the U.S. And if you dig into, they didn't give you a citation, but if you dig into where that number comes from, it comes from a study that looked at 155 people and then expanded it to the whole population, and it wasn't actually using the Rome 4 criteria to measure it. They just said, oh, if you vomited recently, did a hot shower help you? And you're a cannabis user. That takes on food poisoning. It takes on all types of stuff.
Right.
So there's a lot of criticism of that number that was thrown around. Now, I'm not going to dismiss CHS. It's a real thing. It happens. Its frequency, though, is really hard for us to know because it's one of these things that's diagnosed retroactively. Like you have to have cyclic episodes of vomiting, not just once. It has to be associated with cannabis use. You have to have a hot shower relief, and it has to go away when you abstain. So it's retrospectively determined that you had it. And very few people get all the way through that 6-month abstinence period to know and report back that, that was in fact CHS. So, there's another study out there from Schwartz that did a better job at zeroing in on this. And it looked at diagnostic codes like I think it's the F27 code, which is like cyclic, vomiting, and then cannabis use. And even that is too broad. And that picks up, a set of people that had those two things coincident in the codes. And that found like 113,000 ER visits in 806 million ER visits over 7 years.
Think about that.
Like that is a really, really small frequency.
Very small.
I mean, Kevin, you have a very polished scientific background outside of cannabis. You're obviously working with some pretty cutting edge stuff inside the industry with cannabis. At what point in the timeline do we start to put studies together that actually make sense from the medical and the scientific community that just debunks this nonsense that's being purported in the mainstream media? Or do the people within the HHS, do the people within the CMS, and the people within the real scientific community just discount this stuff and fundamentally understand that once reform catches up, the real science behind cannabis is going to start to come to the forefront of this, and we're not going to have the Alex Beresons of the world just equipped with sheer misinformation?
Yeah, that's I think unfortunately that's sitting on Pam Bondi's desk, and from her behavior of this last week, she seems to be pretty untouchable. I mean, I can't believe the stuff I'm seeing in Congress or wherever that hearing was, that she's just sniping back at these people as if there's no accountability.
None.
So I'm very concerned that if Schedule 3 is on her desk, there's problems there, and that she formerly used to represent Pfizer.
Yeah.
And so, if you follow the Brooke Jackson case on the vaccines, a lot of people are pointing at her being like, she's blocking that. And there was a very recent deal, I think, after the vaccines were getting a lot of scrutiny with RFK Jr., Borla helicoptered in and gave Trump a $90 billion discount.
Yeah.
I'm sure that came with some deals. I don't know what they are, but it may be to, hold back on that case or, delay Schedule 3, who knows? But there's no doubt a lot of money on the table for what, cannabis can do to everything in Pfizer's pipeline.
So circling back to what you saw yesterday, you have concerns now for the rescheduling process after Bondi's performance. Am I reading that correctly?
I'm worried that Schedule 3, hoping she's just going to push it through is, I don't know. It doesn't seem like they can hold her to account. If she can get away with what she did yesterday, like how can they hope and pressure her to get Schedule 3 moving along? Now that might just get delayed until maybe right before midterms or something to try and reboot.
If cannabis reform is moving forward, and if cannabis is, I don't want to call it an existential threat, but such a threat to pharma, why haven't they just embraced it? Because they could synthesize it, scale it, and start to really generate revenue off of it. Or am I just completely wrong in that assumption?
No, you're not. I mean, when I've gone to a lot of these ICRS conferences where they really zero in on like the pharmacology of cannabinoids and what receptors they hit, what you tend to find are the farmers are there, they're paying attention, but they tend to be wanting to modify the compounds so that they're synthetic derivatives so they can get patent protection on them. They don't want to go into the market like GW did, where they end up with a product that there is a known generic that you can probably source through dispensary for a fifth or 10th of the price. That ends up with a market that is a bit more challenging for you to navigate because you'll get dispensaries, selling, Frick Simpson oil or what have you, other types of Epidiolex mimics in the marketplace. So I think they tend to view it through, they do not want to approach the long FDA process with something that has no IP. And it's, granted, GW had some IP on like botanical drug substances and how they manufactured that, but it's not hard for people in the epilepsy field to like go to other providers from Charlotte's Web or Miriam's Hope and get, high concentration and high quality CBD to get the same outcome. And so I think that is probably the main issue, is that they're reluctant to get into the botanical drug substance area and push on this. And it might take them like far too long. Like cannabis actually has an impact on so many different aspects of their pipeline that they'd have to serially go through many, many different trials and studies to knock down each one of those things. And they're probably afraid that is too long of a path to make a difference. And it's easier for them to perhaps, join arms with the alcohol lobby and try to spread FUD like this.
Kevin, have you met with lawmakers, regulators at any time that just talks about just an understanding of the background of, the plan itself? Because like Anthony said, you have a very extensive scientific background that can really educate people on how they view the overall industry. But there's a lot of misinformation out there, as we know, but we need to fix that. If that is the case, and it is the case, like, have you had these types of conversations? What are some of the common questions? If so, if you are actually experiencing that?
Well, lately it's been more about the hemp versus cannabis regulations and how those need to be harmonized. Yeah. Just because that's creating such economic mayhem inside of our industry that, many operators are going out of business or having to deal with, what I worry about is a lot of the ammo that people like Alex Berenson have may in fact be legitimate when you look at like synthetics.
Correct.
You get THCP into vape pens in smoke shops and kids. Like that's frightening. That could in fact create some paranoia and some ER visits. But that all gets blamed on the cannabis industry. And at the same time, when they heavily swing back on the hemp industry, as they did with the most recent bill, it starts to threaten all the great physicians that have been treating kids with CBD for decades, right? Some of the foundational companies in our space that really brought cannabis to the forefront were dealing with pediatric epilepsy patients, and they're going to get hammered by that thing. And so that's a real disaster if we let that fall through. So this entirely is within like this MAHA movement. Like they should embrace this. And I do have some contact with those folks, and I'm frequently chirping up. I don't know if it's going anywhere, but it is it fits their ethos, which is we need generics, we need things that are cheap and affordable, like cannabinoids, and that have really high safety profiles. And that's what I think a lot of these pundits are all missing, is they don't have any understanding of the safety window of cannabinoids.
Did Congress get it right by banning everything back in November?
No, I think that was just too blunt. In that it looks like that's gonna take out some of these CBD companies. And so that's going to get litigated, and maybe it won't occur in November. But I think they really need to get surgical here and go after the CB1 agonists, like the THCPs and the HHCs, and even Delta 8 is like the way in which people make Delta 8 leaves a whole library of different cannabinoids. We don't know what they do. And then the dosing on those things is sometimes like 500 milligrams on some edibles. It's just like you're going to create problems with that.
It's crazy. I mean, I was in a dispensary. I was in a smoke shop in South Carolina, and they had 1,000 milligram edibles. Whoa. I was like,
what are they thinking?
Yeah, like who's going to take that? And the guys like, "Oh, you want to buy some?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm buying 10 milligram drinks."
Yeah,
like I want absolutely nothing to do with that.
That's liability. Your dog eats that, and it's a mess.
Correct.
You ever come across anyone that's taken 1,000 milligram edible?
I'm not going to name names, but I've known a couple people.
I've known in the medical area. I've met people that get tolerated up to that level because they're dealing with cancer or something else.
Okay.
So there's a need for it. I just don't think you need it in a gas station.
No, at all. It's like Fear and Loathing with Johnny Depp.
Yeah,
not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin, you brought up a pretty good point with the psychosis angle. When they're talking about psychosis and they're talking about an increase in psychosis, they're not taking into account variables such as we just came out of a pandemic, social media, technology, SSRIs. Berenson goes on TV and masquerades as if cannabis is just inducing psychosis in mass in the population. Like, when does that start to get filtered out?
Yeah,
because it's just pseudoscience and false.
Oh yeah, there's papers that go against this. They're published in JAMA that show that between two. I think the last paper I saw I posted today was from 2003 to 2017. During this era of legalization, there's no sign of increased psychosis. Looking across like something like 68 million beneficiaries, right? Yet he runs with some type of anecdote saying it's happening all the time with cannabis. Yeah, it can. Someone takes 1,000 milligram edible from a gas station, they're going to freak out.
Yeah.
But that's taking an antidote and claiming it's happening population wide. We just don't see that. The other issue that he never is honest about is that most of these other drugs that are out there that may in fact cause psychosis, you get involved with SSRIs or lithium, right? These drugs have a very narrow therapeutic index. All right. Therapeutic index is the ratio of like the lethal dose to the effective dose. All right. Mm-hmm. You want that to be a very large number so that a lethal dose is like 1,000 times higher than the effective dose, like it is with cannabis. All right. You get into lithium, it's 3.
Jesus.
Right? Wow. You get to SSRIs, it's like 20. You know, caffeine, over the counter caffeine, alcohol, nicotine can be in the 10 to 20 range. You know, so what happens in a scenario like that is when people overdose, I'm sure they get psychosis like an hour before they die, but they dead. You know, cannabis, some people can take 100-fold too much. They'll be psychotic for a while and sober up pretty quickly.
Correct.
Maybe in 24 hours, but they're not dead. So there's a very large window of dosing that can happen on cannabis, which means you get to see certain patient attributes you never see in other drugs because they die before you see it. And they just won't even discuss toxicity of these things to recognize that, yeah, when you have a large dosing window like that, you're going to find some people that don't respond well at high doses. And had that been Adderall, it wouldn't be here for you to see it.
Of course, that's a pretty damn good point.
Kevin, how much does race and stigma still play in this industry here in 2026? Because like when you look at this, common sense shows that how are we still here in a Schedule I drug?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really followed it from that angle. You do see a lot of these doctors that are spouting off about how everyone's are losers or whatever, and and that this slows you down, is lethargy, and they seem to take a social angle on this. That
Very much so.
is like, how would they ever know? Do you really think everyone's running around that's productive advertising that they're a weed smoker? You know? And then the second thing is they took that article from New York Times and they just assumed everyone there was smoking weed.
Correct.
You're like, wait a minute, like half the market's edibles. What are you talking about? This is probably a bunch of grannies that are taking gummies at night or replacing alcohol with a THC drink. Do that.
Well, that's what I mean. Is that
I said that this morning? Like, if you watched the Will Kane episode yesterday with Alex Berenson, like, there's not a lot of people that still watch Fox News, but the ones that do, I bet you there were senior citizens in the middle of Florida that were watching Fox News, laughing their asses off, being like, "What are these guys talking about? I take my 2 milligram edible every day. I'm good, and I'm not consuming myself into a psychotic state, nor does anything that this guy is saying rooted in truth."
Yeah. So those people are included in that number. That 17 million number includes people who would take a 2.5 milligram THC drink at night.
Yeah.
And then just to say, oh, everyone's smoking weed, I don't like the smell of it kind of thing is like, well, you know, that's, you know, I'm not here to advocate people run around and blaze up in public settings because it aggravates some people, but you know, they're not taking the same stance on diesel trucks and, you know, all types of other air pollutants that people are free to, you know, push around. So yeah, I mean, the community would be better if we just like, you know, were more discreet. And in fact, some of these vape pens do that. You know, they make it so it's not as obnoxious in a public setting. But you know, that's another thing they want to hammer on is, oh, these vape pens are now 80% THC. This is a new thing that's occurring, and it's like, no, there's 60% THC hash has been around for 1,000 years. I don't, you know, so what? It's 80%. It's a little bit more. People are going to titrate. That's not the real issue. The real issue is taking something that has like 30 times or 100 times more potency. That's a synthetic that you find in the black market.
Correct.
That should be on the radar.
Brady Cobb said it best to us earlier this week. This is not for everyone, but you know, and that is the truth. Like, this isn't for everybody, but at the same time too, these Grant Cardone coming out on Twitter and, you know, putting a blanket statement about, you know, the cannabis space. But you bring up a very good point that there's probably a lot of people out there that are cannabis users that don't necessarily have to broadcast it. Like, you don't see people broadcasting what kind of drink or beverage that they like to party with all the time. And, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone really cares. But with this particular case, I just think it's brand new and people don't know what the future looks like. But this is so way overthought. I'm up in Canada and we've legalized it federally. And you know how much people talk about the legalization of cannabis now? It's like a big fat zero. It's just so blown out of proportion on the US.
Speaking of, I mean, Kevin, obviously you're with Medicinal Genomics. I mean, on the positive side with what's going on and everything in the cannabis industry, I mean, what are you working on right now? I mean, I guess, what have you been up to? Because I mean, last time we spoke, it was some pretty interesting stuff that you guys were working on the genomic part of the plant.
Well, you know, we've been taking a closer look into fusarium, which is something that devastates the plant and is probably something that that can harm people too. We don't look for that, and it does weigh into the CHS story a little bit. Like, you know, most of CHS I think really is THC or CB1 agonist based, because when you give them synthetics, you can recapitulate it. But I don't know that it captures all of it, because they never do blood testing on these people. When they diagnose it, it's all based on symptoms and relief by abstinence, but they don't actually blood chemistry check whether there's like THCP present or pesticides or something else. So there could be a subfraction of this that's in fact mycotoxin driven. There's one in fusarium called vomitoxin, which can cause vomiting, right? And now I think that's the minority of the cases out there. This is all speculative, but it's one of these mycotoxins that we don't screen for, and it keeps coming up in the literature as, hey, look, we're finding this more and more in cannabis, and there's a lot of fusarium out there. And the growers are kind of aligned with that. They don't want that around either, because it's not like, oh, we're testing for this and it's going to hurt your revenue. It's like, no, if you have fusarium, your grow is going to go down. So they're aligned in like trying to get rid of this thing. And so we have actually more grows that use that than any like regulated lab that is checking for whether it's present, because it's not a pass-fail criteria. But I think that's an area that may weigh in on this, because I do think the CHS stuff is something we've got to be honest about with the field. It does exist. We don't know its frequency, but it's awful when it happens. It's probably very expensive to care for these people. And we need a solution for them to, get off of this. And abstinence is really hard for some of these folks because they're oftentimes medical patients that have been relying on this. I mean, there's a really good podcast from Cody Peterson that's on CanMed's website right now, and he just did a nice survey on this, and about 1,000 people or so. And the interesting thing in his survey is that the people who are using vape pens, it takes about 2 years of consuming like a couple gram vape cartridges a week. Like it's a high load. And now if they're using flower, it can take 10 years for it to kick in. Okay. Which is like, and the numbers that you got to use for that are even higher. So there does seem to be some dose associated with the amount of THC you're consuming and how frequently. So when these people have to stop, I'm sure it's a big disruption to their ECS. They have to find a way to fix that. And I'm hoping we'll find, some physicians at CanMed that have come up with some alternatives, and maybe they're not cannabinoids. Maybe there's some other, fungal thing that you can use that maybe helps these people through that transition period. But, straight abstinence has been really hard for them because they're often using it to treat chronic pain or something else. So yeah, we've been working on that area. We've also been playing around with some DNA detection tools to pick up hermaphroditism in the plant, because we have this sex test out there that figures out males and females. But what you really want to know is which ones are prone to hermaphrodite on you, because if you've got a female that's prone to hermy on you, you'd like to know that genetically and to call that as well. And there's now been some nice published work on that front. The third thing I found really interesting, which has nothing to do with what we've done, other than we do a lot of DNA sequencing of the plants out there. And a great study came out recently showing they were able to go back to the hop genome and find some ancestral cannabichromene genes and look at their differences and change the cannabis cannabichromene gene back to more of its ancestral state and get that gene to turn on, which means they could now get cannabichromene cannabis plants if they can figure out how to either, breed that way or GMO it, or some of them are talking about putting it in yeast or bacteria to grow and brew CBC. And I think that's an important cannabinoid because we never really had it at high levels.
Why is that important, Nick? Why is that an important cannabinoid?
It has different properties than CBG and CBD, and I'll have to dig up some of the presentations that I saw at CanMed last year. I think some people were looking at that one in colon cancer. And I just get excited whenever we find a new one, because there's bound to be, if you can get it produced at a high enough level, we can then figure out, okay, what else can we use this for? Oftentimes we don't have good answers to that question because it's at such a low level in the plant.
Yeah.
That it's always contaminated with some other cannabinoid and you don't really know which one's doing the job. But I always get excited when they finally find a way to mass produce a new one, because the physicians are bound to find a new tool for it.
I'd be curious to see percentage-wise, out of the 40 medical markets in the U.S., how many homes do you think have some sort of cannabinoid in their medicine cabinet? Because we always talk about in the next 5 to 10 years, every household across the U.S. will have one. But, when you look at where we are today, where we were even 5 years ago, we can get kind of frustrated with some of the stuff that goes on the reform level and the stigma that's still there. But when you stop and pause and really look at the space as a whole, especially in the medical aspect, it's night and day compared to where we are today versus where we were 5 years ago.
Oh, I think we're seeing it in the alcohol data.
Yeah.
No, that's going down like 10%. It's a big drop, and that should have massive health consequences. If there in fact is a link with that graph that they showed in the New York Times, what they should have done is overlaid that with the consumption of ethanol. And show that, okay, this is actually a substitution that's going on. That's not to be afraid of. That's something that we should actually encourage and step on the gas, because if people are trading off THC drinks for alcohol, that'll have a massive and positive impact on the health of people.
Yeah, for sure. When Huber was on Bill Maher's show, I thought he was great with some of the stuff he was explaining. When he got into very scientific, terms, Bill Maher, the guests on the panel and the crowd started laughing because, in some ways, like the audience that Bill Maher is obviously attracting is a lot older. But when I sat there, watched the actual clip itself, it made me realize like there is a lot of younger audiences where he's just talking about the lifestyle and health and how people are very conscious of what's putting in their body. That is the younger generation, and that's who he skews to a lot of people a lot of the times, and that is the future. But to your point, yes, like alcohol is at the forefront, and we see some credible stats that show how much that industry has been hit hard. And probably in a lot of ways, why this ban was put in the first place when we think about probably some of the lobbyists out of Kentucky that are friends with Mitch McConnell that put this whole ban in place with hemp to begin with. So anyway,
Kevin, you mentioned CBC. As we get further down the road, at what point in time are you expecting that we start to really focus on minor cannabinoids and terpenes as being the therapeutic molecules in cannabis, and it's much less a conversation around THC? Because I feel like that's where we're going, but the companies and the cultivators and maybe the science to a certain perspective really aren't there yet to start to usher that age in, I'll call it, for the industry.
Yeah, I think that does come back to production. Like the challenge with the minors is that it's been very hard to get reasonable sizes of them that aren't co or contaminated with the others. So THCP and THC, I shouldn't say THCV and CBDV have now making their way into the market because people have figured out how to breed plants that are more dominant in those. So once we get that, I think ironed out, where we can get plants that are pure and make predominantly one cannabinoid or another, and we know how to perhaps fractionally distill them and pull them all out independently, we can start to get much more clarity on that. And I am seeing that in some of the oils out there. They now have some companies out there that are selling straight up CBG, CBGA, and CBDV, and so we're now starting to get really pure and isolated alternate cannabinoids, so that the physicians can start experimenting with. All right, maybe this is what helps with autism or epilepsy for this patient, because not all the patients respond to the same cannabinoid, and unfortunately, it is a bit of an experimentation. Like when you speak to the physicians at CanMed, they'll tell you that they start them with one regimen, and then if the seizures keep going, they slowly mix in the others and take them away until they dial in on a cannabinoid cocktail that seems to fit that patient. And that process really requires they have good quality control on the people producing these things, and then they can be assured of if they're tested. They know the concentration of these things, and that's really hard right now in the industry because most of the testing labs are struggling with banking.
Correct.
So it's hard for those businesses to scale. And right now with the interstate commerce laws, they have to build a lab in every state. They can't centralize this anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, which actually segues to our first segment here today, but hopefully we get reform, and that's what's going to fix a lot of these issues, I think. But I know we feel a little indifferent after what happened yesterday at the Attorney General, but I still feel like it's going to happen, but don't ask me when.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Listen, good catching up with you. I appreciate the update. Appreciate some of the feedback, and let's look to continue to have you on more and more because there's a lot of stuff that I think a lot of people enjoy having you on, hearing what you have to say. There's a lot of stuff that I learned too, and Anthony as well. And, it's important just to really understand the scientific angle. And there's probably a lot of things that we don't understand, but the more that we do, we get an idea as to where this industry is going. So appreciate the time, Kevin. Okay.
Awesome. Great. Good seeing you guys.
Thanks, Kevin. Good seeing you.
Appreciate it. All right. That concludes today's podcast. Wow, we're almost an hour and 15 in. I've got some feedback from the YOLO ETF. They actually trimmed Charlotte Web yesterday, but bought it back today at a better price. This is what they have told me. So, Anthony, you might be onto something based on some of the stuff that you shared this morning. But Charlotte's Web getting the attention of a few people in the space right now. So, thought I would share that to everybody. And again, if you want to check out YOLO, log on to Advisory Shares. Again, it was the #1 performing cannabis ETF in 2025. So they're adjusting a few things, but again, trimmed Charlotte's Web yesterday and bought back today at a better price. And Charlotte's Web might be gaining some momentum in this space as we get closer to this pilot program that's supposed to kick off potentially in the month of April. Our interview with Kevin McCurden, that was locked in, presented by Free Nicotine Pouch. I don't smoke, I don't vape, and I don't want anything into my lungs. But on busy days, I want to focus, and that's why I sometimes use Free Nicotine Pouches. Clean nicotine delivery, no smoke, no vapor, and full control from 3 milligrams up to 15, depending on your day. If you want to focus and basically block out the noise, check out freepouch.com. That's FREpouch.com, and own your edge, everyone. All right, that concludes everything for this week. Good little show here today. A lot of information. And we'll be back next Tuesday for our latest live stream holiday, both in the US and Canada. So we will not be here on Monday, But back here Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Anything else you want to add, my friend?
It's good. It was a good show. I think it was a good close to the week. And I will be locked in on the golf course on Monday.
Man, would I love to play golf. It was kind of nice when I was watching the Super Bowl before the game, seeing some of the camera action. And I'm just like, wow, that's what life looks like. Sun, green grass, and everything's alive. And
that is.
It's got its pros and cons living in an area where it's the 4 seasons. And right now we are in the dog days of winter, and it feels it. But listen, have fun golfing, and everybody else enjoy your weekend. And got a good interview coming out, or a good video coming out tomorrow about my views on this whole Pam Bondi situation from yesterday and the effects that it could or couldn't have on the rescheduling of cannabis. Our latest TDR Cannabis in 5 tomorrow morning as well. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we will have the weekly recap presented by freepouch.com. And then on the weekend, my weekly recaps of both the performance this week for YOLO and MSOS. That's it for now. AV, enjoy the rest of your day. And Brady, enjoy your rest of your day as well. We'll see you back here next Tuesday, 4 o'clock on our latest TDR Traded Black presented by Flowhub. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for watching here today. Listen, if you're getting value from us here at TDR, make sure to check us out at TDR Plus. It's our exclusive membership community. Why? Well, you'll see CEO interviews that go beyond business, showing a personal side that you won't find anywhere else, including the biggest names in the industry. Plus, you'll get insights from analysts and day traders on where the industry's headed, both short-term and long-term, and a direct chat group with our team. It's only $7 a month, just 25 cents a day, and it helps support everything we do here at TDR. If you want to join, just click the join button below and become a TDR Plus member today. And once again, a big thank you for being part of our community. So that's it for today. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.